to today's webinar from the Open Group, and many thanks for joining us. Today's event is being brought to us by QRS, active member of the Open Group and an evangelist of the Open Group's views of EA, and providing an open community to facilitate the sharing and value generation of ideas and concepts. Before I hand over to our speaker today, Jason Opal, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping issues just to keep the event moving forward smoothly. First of all, we would encourage you to submit questions during this event. One of the reasons why we bring these events to you. There are two ways to submit questions. You can either write your question in the text chat facility, or you can write it in the text QA facility. If you do submit a question, can I please ask you to address those questions to all participants? That one gets to see all the questions that are being submitted. Jason will answer your questions at the end of the presentation. This event is also being fully recorded, so that's both audio and visual. So from tomorrow, you'll be able to view the whole presentation again. So if you have any local technical difficulties or if you have to leave the event early, then that recording will be available for you to view in the future. QRS will be sending an email to you all with the URLs where you can access those recordings. In addition, QRS, I believe, are planning to send you all a copy of Jason's presentation today. In addition to the full slide set, they will be including a range of slide notes, provided further information so you get further value from today's presentation and the slide set itself. So just before I hand over to Jason, let me just give you a few introductions of Jason. Many of you already know Jason from his numerous speaking engagements. Jason has educated thousands of students about TOGAF, architecture and business transformation, and he's an active member within the Open Group, helping develop architecture community. So for the next hour, Jason will share his expertise and perspectives in creating a world-class business transformation capability. So Jason, I'll build up if you're ready. Can I start your presentation?
Great. Thank you much, Simon, and great for having me here today. And it's my honor and privilege to speak to a large audience about this the concept of business transformation. And those of you who have been around the Open Group and TOGAF for a while, it's always been a discussion among the members is that the TOGAF is good for doing IT architecture, not so much as an enterprise architecture. And that is one of the areas that I wanted to focus on today to give an idea is that while TOGAF does a very good job of doing IT architecture, it's equally good as when we talk about a business transformation. And those areas that we wanted to focus on today. For the next 50 minutes, I will go through some of the material, and then we will leave some time for the questions and answers. And by all means, these slides will be available to you with the notes starting tonight. Just get and so here's our common goals for the day. Today's presentation is one of the things that I wanted to discuss is that when we talk about a business transformation as a particular as an enterprise capability, why need it and what exactly is it? Get into business transformation, then a subject comes up. Well, in order to do effective business transformation to deliver the goals of the transformation, we have a TOGAF as a framework, but then there are other disciplines also required, not just TOGAF. So how do you bring all those disciplines together? And the next thing is that when we start bringing TOGAF compliant tools, we have to keep it in back of mind if we're going to bring other disciplines into our fold, into this fold of business transformation, those two have to meet the other disciplines' needs as well, not just enterprise architects. And the time permits, then I will give you an overview of a QRS, is a BT Cloud tool. The one is a TOGAF certified, and you can see the more detail on the Open Group spec. I'll show you where that is. So, and then when we start looking at it, saying, okay, so now we know what business transformation is. Now we know how TOGAF and other disciplines fit to it. And then we start looking at it and saying, really to bring this thing into the organization. And it becomes a big challenge is part of the reason it's a challenge because it is a very disruptive implementation because it requires so many other disciplines to participate. And something that we particularly don't pay a lot of attention to is the concept of organization change management. And through our experience, we discovered that it's the journey that is more important, not the end game. So how do you actually take all the other disciplines along with you as you moving forward? Because if you leave them behind, you're going to have a success, but it's not going to be sustainable or repeatable. And we suggest you a pragmatic approach, which is a suggestion. There's no one way to do anything, and this is the approach to it. And then most importantly, once you have heard and listened everything in this presentation, you have to develop your own roadmap that you will develop for business transformation capability in your organization is very much dependent on your organization appetite. Not so much as what the end game is, how fast they want it to get there, and how much change the organization is willing to accept. So that has to be your own roadmap. I can give you some suggestions and some ideas to think about and lessons learned from the past, but that roadmap has to be uniquely your organization's roadmap to create a business transformation as a capability. When said, and that's basically our agenda for next 45 minutes. We get to the first topic is that when we start looking at this thing, creating a business transformation capability, and the idea was always, and so, well, if you're going to start something, start with a business outcome. Why are you doing this thing? What would you expect if you actually achieve the business this capability? And then once you start thinking capability, then you have to sort of look at it and say, well, what are the relevant processes that are affecting the capability? As we all know, the capability has three components. It has a people and has a process and it has a technology component to it. So having taken the process component into the consideration first, then you start looking at it saying, how do you simplify the process and standardize the process? And simplification and standardization of that process is as relevant as the skills that you have in the organization. And so you think about automating, and that way you set the process to automate the standardized process with the people and skills that you have in the organization or skills that you can develop. Finally, you actually measure the outcome. Did you get what you expected to get? If not, then you go back to say what part of the process and skills and automation that actually broke down. So having said that, so when we start thinking about a business transformation capability, we always think about two benefits that an organization can realize. One of the benefits is to, currently in your IT organization, information and the communication technology as a whole bunch of assets, you're providing those assets are providing services to the enterprise capabilities. That people always wanted to look at and saying, we have the IT operating budget of X dollars a year. How do you know we're getting the most out of those dollars? The second part that you want to look at it is to, as new investments are coming in, how do you know, are you making the right investments? Are you picking the right projects, initiatives, and doing the right enough architecture, just creating enough of a technology, not just creating technology for the sake of technology? So there's start thinking about is the business outcomes. And it's a couple of examples. This is one from healthcare. When we're thinking out business outcomes, think about it, we have a readmission rate of 30%. We would like to reduce it to 3%. Now, that's a direct measurable business value. So now what will be the capabilities required in order to reduce that readmission rate from 30% to 3 years over the next 3 years? And the same thing is that similarly, I can think about it. What is my cost to administer benefits? If my cost is more than 3% over the industry, or am I at the industry level? So those are the kind of business goals that business transformation allows you to achieve. And then you think about information technology capabilities, information and communication technology capabilities are actually helping those kind of enterprise capability that allow you to achieve those results. So that's what our goal was, is that if you have a business transformation capabilities, and these are the two that you go after, optimizing the cost of your ICT assets and bringing new assets and making sure they are aligning to business needs and helping achieve the business goals. That being said, is that, so next question becomes, is that what exactly is business transformation capability? And so if you know every organization today, because the competition is coming from all over, and the CEO, the number of three concerns is the market share and is the profit margins, and most importantly, what are the set of products and services that you have in the pipeline. Today you could have a great market share and profit margins, but if you don't have effective products coming down the pipeline, and that market share is going to erode, as you've seen in the mobile phone industry, is that you could be the number one in the world, but it doesn't take long before you actually start to go to oblivion. So if that is the case, that's the way you're most concerned with, then the question for us becomes, an enterprise architects or business transformation professionals, is to think about what can we do. So what happens is that as opposed to thinking about business transformation once every economic cycle, you start to think about it on a continuous basis. Every year, every quarter, every week, you think about it, you rethink your operating models. Once you rethink your operating models, and you start thinking about realigning your capability. Perhaps some capabilities are required, some new ones are required, and the old ones have to be modified, or some might have to be retired. So I guess this sports team analogy in this conversation is that sports team assesses their capabilities not once a year, but every Sunday. And then next they plan for the following week. So in order to do this, is to bring this kind of thinking, you need to engage the entire organization. The scope of business transformation in this kind of context that we are discussing is not a once a year, once every 7-year cycle. It's continuous. So the idea here is that the change that we're talking about here in transformation is not how big the investment is required, is that how big is the impact of that change on the variables that we're talking about. A lot of the times those changes are not necessarily big, but they are small, incremental changes, and they have a huge impact on new products and pipelines that actually affect the market share and margins. We've seen that the way social media has penetrated into the organizations, and we just need to have to think about it. Is how do we actually use this? The social media has shown us how people like to participate and engage. So that is basically our context for business transformation, is to engage the rest of the organization to continuously rethink your operating model and required capabilities and how they affect the outcomes that your CEO is mostly concerned with. If that is a business transformation as a capability, then your next step to think about is what are the relevant processes? Thinking relevant processes, you all of a sudden come across this is a huge industry that are a lot of disciplines engaged in the business transformation. Strategic planning, enterprise architecture, portfolio management, organization change, and you name them, we have them. But another thing, what happens, each one of those disciplines have created their own set of frameworks and methods and tools and technologies. So we ended up with a large number of stakeholders in the organizations who have own methods and practices and frameworks and their own certifications and their own world about it. And now is in order to tie them all together into one coherent unit, that becomes a hugely disruptive change in the organization. So this is one of the reasons why I was bringing it up to is that business transformation capability, everybody wants it, but not too many people are succeeding it. Part of the reason they're not succeeding it is because it is a huge change. Understanding the fact that it is a big change, we need to make sure that we actually handle it as such. So methods and techniques available to us that when we start thinking about it, if it's a disruptive change, then let's handle it as such. One of the groups of this disruptive change is if any of you are interested in reading this article, I encourage you to do a Google search. You'll be very surprised at how useful you will find this, The Challenges of Disruptive Change by Clayton Christensen. And the idea that he brings in this is that how you actually engage a lot of disciplines in the organization, creating an enterprise capability, not individual skills. The one thing that they bring up in this, they say, some of the principles they use is the respect for each other, respect for each discipline, so bringing each discipline into the fold. And next thing, the leadership doesn't always mean that you are always in charge. Next thing is that the expertise, principled creation. Collaborate without having to give up your ground. So this is a similar kind of thing that when you think about it, I like to use this a jazz band analogy, is jazz music is that it's any given time, if those of you know jazz music, is that the people playing the bands is that they're at one time there's one solo going on, while all the other participants are joining in the discussion in the music creation. There's one solo. So as time goes on, as the song goes on, different people, different discipline or musician has solo going on. So this is thing happens in a business transformation capability is that it's not one discipline's always in charge. Different disciplines are in charge depending on what phase gate you're in. And I'll talk to you about that in a little bit further. And they sort of think about that, and then you say all the discipline, then you had to create a end-to-end value chain. How these in value chain, how these process disciplines are going to fit in. One of the most important things is that in Christensen articles is that be very, very crisp what you do and why you're doing it, and the principles that you want to use to it, because those are the things that hold the entire thing in a glue. Look at this approach, and then we said, well, let's create an end-to-end process. Let's reinvent the wheel, create an end-to-end process, and see what are the phase gates. And information is created in each one of the phase gates, and who creates that information, what disciplines are engaged, and how do we know by creating some quality checklist, how do we know the critical information has been created? Not only from critical information created from you as a creator's point of view, is the person who's going to make a decision with that information, and also, once the decision is made, people who are going to consume that information in subsequent phases. So your customers and suppliers have to be happy with the information that you created. Pardon me, I have a bit of allergies. So I think about it in phase gates, and the phase gate G0, and this is nothing different than a project program and portfolio management is doing for years, phase gate implementation. But the thing that we've done in the phase gate thinking is that created a specific roles and responsibilities and information being created. So G0 phase gate is that this is where the organization defines its strategic intent. What do we want it to be good at? Based on that, we create an operating model. Then we define what are the enterprise capabilities required. And based on those enterprise capabilities, then we define what are the IT capabilities required, and IT or ICT capabilities. Based on that, what goals we want to do, we tie those capabilities to business strategies. So a business strategy is essentially a very clear document that describes, if this is the business strategy, these are the capabilities that are affected, and performance of the capability is X today, and we would like it to be Y. If it's Y, then we can achieve these outcomes. So at one phase gate, I have a business strategy that clearly articulates what are the capabilities affected. This is where we do from G0 to G1, among other disciplines, and TOGAF is involved in doing AEM architecture at a contextual level of detail. From G2, now we know what the strategy is, so we know what the affected capabilities are. Next thing we start thinking about, let's create a roadmap. This is when we do a conceptual level business and data and application technology architecture, as is in 2B and GAPS. And identify our opportunities and gaps and identify portfolio projects. So now I have, in a G2 stage, I have an investment portfolio that will be required for me to actually transition those capabilities. G2, G3, I do a logical architecture and physical architecture and SDLC and manage those programs. G3, all those capabilities, then I not only maintain and nurture them, but I actually exploit them. And the fourth stage is then we have a value realized, and then we can actually retire those capabilities. So what happens is that from G0 to G1, 2, 3, and 4, it is not the left to right process. It is agile. You start wherever the work needs to be started. For example, if the work comes in today to be done, and there's no change to the architecture, but if the design change alone can handle it, then our question becomes is that then that work starts as G2 phase gate and design change happens. And the project be handled as a change to design without having to do with the architecture. If something changes in the industry, then we have to rethink the capability. Perhaps that work needs to go back to G0 phase gate. Somebody has to decide, should we be having this capability in-house, outside, or not even having it at all? Should we be leading in this thing, or should we be lagging it in? So that's my phase gate thinking. So now if I take the next step of this phase gate thinking, and I can sort of tie this thing back onto my continuous planning. Each idea comes through, and each idea can be evaluated on its own and say what capability it affects, how big is this change is, and then I can create a very effective repository of my capabilities and ideas and changes to those ideas. So as I was saying before, from G0 to G1 phase, it's not just the architects who are involved. There's the scorecard methods approach, 5 forces analysis, and strategic planning. And all of those people are engaged in it, and each one of us have a role to play in creating a business strategy that clearly links to what are the capabilities and what is the current performance targets and what will be the required targets. So this is where senior management really need to make a very strategic decision, is that by transitioning this capability from A to B would allow us to achieve the outcome. And that is a very hyperbolic thinking, is that just because you have improved your customer relationship service calls from 99% of the calls get responded in 2 seconds or less, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a 30% customer retention rate. Ability will perform to that 99% of the calls are responded within 2 seconds, but 30% of customer retention rate may not happen. That implies that capability performed as expected, but the capability performance was not linked to the outcomes expected. So with the G1, then I use the TOGAF as a conceptual architecture and I do a roadmap. And the G2 to G3, I do a logical and physical. And this is where my SDLC and my agile development and the Prince and PMI methodology, whatever methodology you use, it works in play. And the G3 to G4 is my ITSM and visualization as described in TOGAF and LIT. And at the bottom, I have a whole series of things that TOGAF defines as a content framework and continuum and skills framework, and those are managed. And there is a method, governance, defined in COBIT. So every one of these disciplines that we talked about, they fit into a methodology creating a business transformation capability. And this is one of the reasons why if you really wanted to measure the effectiveness of business transformation capability, making sure that you're getting most out of your ICT asset and new assets are providing one discipline alone isn't enough. And the thing is that the maturity of all the disciplines combined together makes the maturity of the process in the entire capability. If one process is at level 3 and the other ones are level 2, level 0 or level 1, is that you are going to get level 0 and level 1 performance. So it's a weak link that determines the outcome. This is not to say that we just invented a new framework. All we did is that we defined a process and put the disciplines that are in charge of producing that information. And each one of the disciplines, now they have the way they do things, the way they certify, they educate the professionals. So what we have in here is that by looking at this thing, we have the individual competencies and skills, but combining those individual competencies and skills, we ended up translating into an enterprise capability. Business transformation is not an individual capability, it is an enterprise capability. And that's one of the huge points that I wanted to make today is that in order to really make the process repeatable, regardless who's executing it, it needs to become an enterprise capability. In order to have it, once you have this capability mature and running at a certain level, is that you can actually do your continuous planning every day. New ideas in, and why do you have to wait for a year to plan a new idea if that idea can be executed today? May have value, something might have changed out there because you don't always know who your competition is going to be. So something new comes up and something new happens in industry, and all of a sudden we have this capability to be able to respond to it fast. And this is not a hypothetical, theoretical dream that somebody invented. Many companies are doing this thing today. And then you're not dependent on individual skills, but you are more dependent on your organization's capability. Come and go, but you still produce repeatably consistent results. And this is what we're talking about is in our discussion, is that when we have a business transformation capability, how do you standardize and industrialize it? So therefore have it inside the organization. This thing is that once we know what it is, then there is a method for it. One of the things that we can do is that if we have a process, you have standardized the process, and now you can automate to depending on the level of skills that you have in the organization. And this is what the whole idea of TOGAF compliant tools was all about, it's not give you a one tool for everything. You have one tool, but the thing is that you need to take that tool and adapt to your organization, and this is exactly what TOGAF does. And automation is necessary because one of the things that in a number of disciplines that are engaged in it, behavior modification is a bigger challenge. In notify people's behavior, you have to give them real-time evidence of that what they have done in the last hour or 2 days ago actually matters. It matters in a significant way. If your work doesn't matter, nobody's going to care. And once you have a real-time feedback of providing to people that their work matters, and then you have to, as they do the work, you have to provide them some guidance. Not necessarily every one of us is an expert. And we can't necessarily always be expert in everything. We just need sometimes some guidance. This is where the collaborative learning and education comes into place. And we may work as a team, but our performance is measured individually. So this is accountability and transparency. When the work is assigned to somebody and needs to be done in X number of days, there has to be visibility, is that the person has the skills and the support to do the work, and the work gets done. Because if you, from G1 to G2, and you don't create an architecture roadmap, projects will move forward without you. And that's when we get in trouble. We haven't started doing anything except we have already rebaselined the project 3 times. That's because we never did the architecture understanding up front. What exactly is it going to take? So the next step is then the whole thing is that you have a repository. So all this information that this TOGAF generate framework, like TOGAF allows you to generate, it has to be managed in a useful repository. And there are people who are putting the information in the repository, and there are people who are using the information in the repository. So if there are 5 people who creating the repository information and 250 people are using it, it is good value. If 5 people are creating and 5 people are using it, that is really not a useful repository. Repository to manage 5 people's information and 5 who are consumers, because they already know what's available. So this is why we automate this thing. To automate this thing, we looked at the TOGAF as entire framework, not just modeling. But it's a very important part of the architecture work. But it is business transformation that we are trying to achieve through the TOGAF certification, because TOGAF is not about IT architecture or modeling. TOGAF is a framework to create a business transformation capability. And it ties all the disciplines into it. And one of the reasons why when we talk about ADM, we don't talk about business data and application and technology architecture. We talk about all the left and top and bottom phases of ADM. So we set out to develop a certificate program for a TOGAF, and we actually looked at a requirements from a lot of different points of views. As such, is that in this certification criteria, we have some 600 plus requirements that have to be automated, not just by one tool, but it could be a collection of tools. If you're interested, to see and what those requirements are, to see how those tools are meeting those requirements, I highly encourage you to go to look at the tools certification register on the Open Group website. And a number of certified tools, and the BT Cloud is one of them, but there are others, and there I'd like you to take a look at it and say, what are the requirements for a certified tool? I find these tools or certified tools in any Gartner or Forrester Magic Quadrant because they're not yet. This is the Open Group's thought leadership about saying, if you wanted to create a business transformation capability, you have a framework like a TOGAF. And if you want to industrialize and automate this thing, and this is the requirements for the certified tool. This tool has to meet the needs of all the disciplines, not as enterprise architects. And a component of this thing is learning organization is a very, very essential component of making effective TOGAF, because this is where all your architecture requirements come from. Architecture requirements there has to be an effective and efficient way to manage them. So one of these tools, now we have a framework, we have a process, we have a way to certify these things, and we have a certified tool. Now we're actually getting into the point where we can actually think about it. How we industrialize a framework like TOGAF and business transformation. All right, I wanted to show you a couple of slides. I'll give you some scenarios as to what do the tools look like and what should they do. I can only speak for the ones that I'm most familiar with, the BT Cloud. So let me use a couple of screenshots because I don't want to take a lot of time is giving you a complete demo of this thing because that could take days. But a few screenshots will give you an idea as to what we're trying to get at. So organization is that if I log on to my BT Cloud, this is what I see. And this is on the right side where I'm thinking about how do I create a learning organization? How do I engage the rest of the people in the organization to actually identify what we call an architecture requirements? And architecture requirements are nothing more in the context of a capability. Think about I have a capability that is performing at level A, I need to perform at level B, and what are the obstacles that are getting in the way? Now, from your point of view, from every stakeholder's point of view, and those become your architecture requirements. And those are also the innovative ideas people have. What is it preventing me from being effective and efficient? So once I captured those innovative ideas, and now people can, in my index here on the right side, people can actually join in, and just like the Facebook and Twitter, and improve the idea. Once the idea is improved and validated, and then I can go look back at it and say, well, which capability does this idea affect? What is this capability? Does this change improve my risk? Reduce my risk? Does it reduce my cost? Does it give me revenue opportunities, or it just improves the staff morale, or just a corporate citizenship? So regardless that architecture requirements identify, but it has a direct link to one or more capabilities. So you can clearly take all the ideas being generated in my organization. In this case, I have a participation index of 3. That means, on average, 3 suggestions and feedbacks are being created by each employee. And with all those ideas coming in, and I can link that to capability, I can have a real-time effective capability heat map. I can see how many ideas are linked to these capabilities, so therefore I can actually demonstrate is that this capability needs to be re-architected because we have 200 or 50 ideas that are already identified as an architecture requirements. So what the architecture becomes really critical because all those ideas are there to improve that capability. Now my question is that how do I improve this thing? Perhaps this is where I can make changes to the architecture capability, or I can make a major, or maybe I just have to completely transform it. So learning organization doesn't just work one way. It doesn't always come from the top, or from the bottom, and sometimes something comes from the top. Is the practitioner's challenge. Put out challenges out there to people and say, well, we have this issue. Can you identify how best to go handle it? And in healthcare and other industries, that's what they do. Is the challenge comes from the top. And people to provide input into it. So similarly, in other areas where I can have a social media-like input into when I'm doing architecture work, I'm doing something and I'm having difficulty understanding something, I post a question and I read other people's answers to it. So my learning organization incorporated, and left side I have in my work plan and see what all my work is assigned to me, and then the bottom I have business transformation. Those are the menu items that I have. They're all the services, not only for the architects, but all the other disciplines need to do to effectively participate in the business transformation capability. It's a main screen, but I wanted to give you a little deep dive into the next few screens. And basically, the screen shows me I have an enterprise capability defined, and with that capability, and I have a lower level capabilities to it, on their architectures or requirements, architecture requirements, and what principles are used in what order to architect this thing, what are the opportunity costs, what the performance metrics are, what the technology and competency process views are, and also at the same time, I have a way of capturing knowledge and guidance and saying all the other suggestions on how other people are using this capability. Now then I have one of the other views that architects do most of the time is because when there are half a dozen services the architects provide in our capability-based life cycle, from G0 to G4 gates, and so I can actually standardize those services and say, if you're providing a service from G1 to G2, this is my roadmap, and what are tasks that you're going to do? What are the artifacts and deliverables you're going to produce? What is the governance structure for it? Who's going to approve those artifacts and deliverables that are of the quality? What competencies are required? What skills do we have? And it's thinking about risk management. And who is to those work products? What areas are involved? What are the cost drivers? What are the risk factors? I can actually give you a pretty reasonable template to start with and say, on average, this is what people do. Then you can adapt to it. You get templates and artifacts coming with you, and on the guidance side, I can give you and say, hey, here is in this phase gate, from G to G2, typically people create these 10 artifacts. Here's a couple of them. Other people create these 2 deliverables. I'm using a TOGAF terminology, artifacts and deliverables. And here's some completed templates. If you don't know, here's a 2-hour video that you can watch. How do you actually do this? And if you still have a question, you can post your question and review other people's questions and answers. So the idea here is to provide you enough guidance as you do the architecture work. There's some G0 to G1 phase. It is at the strategic level. G1 to G2 is a more roadmap, and G2 to G3 is you doing work in the project. You are actually looking at is a value realization, exploiting the current capabilities. So there's a structure by which the input can be provided, guidance can be provided, so we can raise the performance of individuals. Then regardless who does the work, we know a minimum level of skills required. Based on minimum level of skills required, then we can actually elevate the entire group's performance. And one is that there's always a continuous learning requirement. So this is what that we actually in our tool provide, is a whole series of e-learnings courses that people are those are available to people. So e-learning courses, but then also there is another collaborative learning program that is I can create a team of people. We can join in and we can create a course and we can participate, and then we provide content and feedback to each other, and this could live forever. And as people are learning, self-learning, so you don't have to be in one classroom to learn. So this could be collaborative learning from all over the place. But it's a focus on creating a business transformation as capability. So I think a couple of views of how Archimate fits into this thing is because modeling is important for architects, but modeling is not the only thing that we do. So Archimate is a modeling language that the Open Group governs. to support that thing, there is a open source modeling tool called Archi. And that's showing you some screenshots from Archi is that because it is a very deep level of architecture modeling capability. From one of our capabilities that we're going to be demonstrating at the DC conference, it won the Most Innovative Healthcare Solution Award from Edison Awards 2 months ago. So we use Archimate to model that. So what you see here is that what are the capabilities required? And model the capabilities, then I can model the next step and say what is the value chain to create that capability, the set of capabilities. And I can create the business and data and application technology architectures and tie them all together. It makes a architecture for a capability. Then I can take this whole Archimate model and integrate to the BT Cloud. And not models go there, the metadata behind the models go there. So I have a capability and processes and application data, all in infrastructure, all tied together in my repository. So now a repository could be used by other people in the organization to assess that if this is a capability that is affected, what process and technologies and data and applications are going to get affected by it. And that's when the repository becomes really useful. Now, one here for people is when you're implementing a repository is to make sure that you don't take it to the level of detail that you can never maintain. So the repository is the level of detail that you can effectively maintain, because the minute information isn't correct, the minute people will stop using it. The idea is that how do you actually create these models and the tool that not only meet the needs of the architect, but meet the needs of all the other disciplines, tie it all together, and that becomes your repository. And this is not a very complicated process that you're automating. It's a very easily implementable if you think about a SharePoint. And basically what we have done is in our BT Cloud is a Microsoft-based deployment. And everything else could potentially reside in SharePoint if that's what you have as a standard repository. But we have data that is the TOGAF find metadata to manage, to define and manage the repository. So I wanted to give you some ideas that then there is additional functions that have to be provided to meet the needs of other disciplines. That is an enterprise capability, the portfolio management, and portfolio analysis, and viewing the Gantt of each one of the projects, what the status is there, what the strategy status is of what needs to be done, what resources are required, and actually do the work that has been assigned to people, and once work is done, where do all that information go? That it actually rides in it. It doesn't become a big folder for a project. When project ends, somebody archives, and functional technical specs got archived with it. As archive the project management document, we also archive the capability documents. So one thing the repository does is that separates out management documents from capability documents. These are all the functions that the people, 4 or 5 people in the organization who are managing the repository will see, but not everybody else needs to see them. So security allows the controls not only who can see, but who needs to see it. So with the method that we talked about, this is not something new that we have created today, and the TOGAF we created in the 10, 15 years ago. This is pretty much a business transformation capability we've been living for 100 years, and I'm just showing you some sample programs that I've been a part of. Some of them have been very successful, the others have been disastrous failures. And failures, I've identified 4 of them since 1999 to 2009, and trust me, those are not the only projects that I worked on that failed. I worked on, as a group, worked on a lot more of them that have failed, but I'm just giving you a breadth of the years that we have been failing projects for all these times. But also at the same time, we've been succeeding with the projects. So the transition and the capability from current to some transition stage. So there are, every time you succeed and every time you fail, you actually have an opportunity to learn. And one of the things that has come across over and over and time after time is that the organizations, they confuse their enterprise capabilities against their individuals' competencies and capabilities. If you need to do a major business transformation, first thing that you really need to have a good, solid thinking about is that do you have the enterprise capabilities to actually execute? Many organizations go out there and sign a fixed price contract with the vendors, and they have no ability to manage fixed price contracts with vendors. Enterprise capability doesn't exist. Senior management inside the company cannot make decisions at the speed they're required. So the contracts start to falter very quickly. Internal leadership doesn't mean that you all have to be in charge and you have to give everybody everything every time. And you need to, many times when we have successful and failed projects, understanding what the impact of your decisions is. Not in the next 2 weeks, impact 18 months, 12 months down the road. In that kind of program before, you know what the impacts are going to be of your decision today. But haven't done that kind of capability before, you will know, you will be making decisions in a vacuum. And most importantly, one that I've seen more times than not that causes transformation programs to fail is not so much as vendors and consultants. I can handle those people through a very tight contract. I track to their performance. I have no way of managing my internal staff's contribution. Staff will get involved in a business transformation programs not because they have the skills to do it, because they feel they should, or good for their careers. They may have the skills, but they take charge. Only to find out that the program failed, and the only recourse you as senior manager have at that point is to fire the individual, and there's nothing else you can do. Fire is the worst thing possibly you can do to a staff when the program fails. Money, time is gone, staff is gone, you have nothing to show for except that 2 years later you're still sitting with no capability to go after the market that you were going after. So you be cautious of these 4 lessons that I have seen over the years. When success happens, these things work tickety-boo. When failure happens, these things are present every time. And as an experienced architect, you start to see these things as signals that things are going to cause you problems down the road. So you have to warn people, but as an external outsiders, you can only warn people. If you're in a business transformation program inside the organization, pay attention to these things, because those 4 elements will cause you a lot more grief. And to implement a business transformation as capability in the organization, you're going to face some additional challenges. Those challenges are overcomable. You can overcome them. The biggest challenge that we've seen is that because the number of disciplines involved in creating the organization capability, transform your business, is a disruptive. But there's a strategy to handle disruptive change. And you have to have a very good organization change management strategy. You deserve to have a transformation capability in 6 months, but the organization have a competency to build it in 2 years. So you have to go at the pace that people are comfortable with. And is creating a roadmap. You know what the current state of the transformation capability, where you would like to be. The challenge is that the transition plan that you created, will your organization accept it? And that is a uniquely yours to the organization, your plan to the organization. And you have to create that very carefully. People don't buy the current state and the future state, the value of it. They don't buy the transition stage. So you hear the comments all the time from people coming around saying, it's not what you did, it's how you did it I didn't like. Skills to build this capability are different from skills to nurture and exploit. So think that you wanted to build it by yourself and nurture and exploit it yourself. You might want to think about it and say, what do I need to build it, and what do I need to nurture this capability? The nurturing skills could be built over time. For ability you may not necessarily want to learn on the fly. Next thing is that you need to deliver results fast. You might do a 2-year plan, but you got to deliver results in the first quarter. If you don't demonstrate some positive impact somewhere along the line, you will not be allowed to live for 2 years. Most importantly, if you can avoid the endless frameworks and process debate. All works are good, all processes are good. They are created by very smart people who have thought through. They have thought from their discipline's point of view, so we need to put them all together. It's not one framework going to do everything. TOGAF is governance, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's no need for COBIT or ITSM. They all have their place, and they all have, in jazz bands, they have their time for solos. These are challenges that you will face, and these challenges that you can overcome, other people have, and you can too. So have the business transformation capability running. It's starting to mature, and the results that you will start to realize, the time and cost to plan. How long does it take before an idea could become a full-fledged program in your organization? If that's dramatic, maybe it needs to become a program right now and then, as in to wait for another fiscal year, because the market might change entirely by then. Efficiency, I look at a number of programs and projects that you are implementing on time, on budget. And to scope is not an arbitrary thing. A scope for a project is that have you transitioned the capability from X to Y, and Y is explicitly measurable. If measurable, it's not a scope. And effectiveness determines is that number of capabilities that are transitioned have actually produced the desired outcome. Now, I said earlier, in a CRM, I can have in 2 seconds, all the calls being responded within seconds, but 30% customer retention rate may not happen. Ability performed, but the outcome doesn't happen. It's still a failed program. And the quality of the information, as we move through phase gate G0 to G1, and the information used by the management and others make decisions, as my quality of that information improves, maturity improves. So some arbitrary way of assessing maturity of my process. I measure the maturity where it matters. If I help make better decisions, that means my process is mature. And I will stop right there, Simon, and I will take some questions. And I just wanted to, before I hand over to Simon, I wanted to remind those of you who are planning to attend Washington, D.C. Open Group Conference, and these are the areas and subjects that we'll be discussing much more in detail. And there are a lot more people there who are experts of it. And this is not an area that any of us have a full monopoly over, that we know exactly what to do. Is that all we know, we have some things that we did work, some things we did don't work. Come learn from the others and debate and discuss this thing so we can take a good lessons learned approach to implementing these things in our organizations.
Jason, many thanks for that very insightful presentation. Yes, we have plenty of questions that have come through on the text chat facility. So this is your opportunity. If you'd like to submit a question to Jason, please do write it into the text chat facility or into the text QA facility. We'll work our way through the questions over the next 10 minutes. First question we have, Jason, this is from Eastwood, asking, with each of the frameworks as part of the end-to-end process taking a certain minimum amount of cycle time, how do you make it agile? And he explains, in some cases, the lengthy process and steps demanded by each of the individual frameworks get in there a speedy, agile delivery. What do you think about that, Jason?
I think that's an excellent question. And those frameworks and disciplines have a very comprehensiveness to it. And one of the things that we do in a business in the end-to-end process is before we start developing some content and artifacts, look at it and say, who's going to consume this information, what decision will they need to make, and how much information is sufficient. Don't necessarily do everything every time. And this is one thing that's very clear in TOGAF. If you start producing all the artifacts in TOGAF, there are more than 250, 300 artifacts. I might only produce 2 out of them. I just need to know which 2 to produce to answer the question. This is where we have to be very, very thoughtful, is to not produce the artifacts because the frame says so. We need to produce what artifacts are that help the organization make a right decision. And that's where agility comes into it. It's not so much as a framework, it's that what is required, your application of your framework. And this is what we did in that end-to-end process. When you are making the work from G0 to D1, here's the checklist. If your work that you've done answers these questions, it's good enough. You don't have to do every one of them. Agile is up to you. Is there to be comprehensive. Not everything in the framework is required every time. And TOGAF says upfront and say, adapt it to your needs. And then the other frameworks. Next.
Yep, Jason. The next question is, what is the difference between business transformation and change management?
But I think that when I was referring to change management, I was talking about organization change management. And I think what I meant by that is by saying organization change management deals with the subject of that as we change a process, as we change our organization, there's an impact of that change on people. How do you mitigate that impact of a change? Organization change management. The transformation looks at is the entire capability point of view, where people are just component of the capability, but the people, process, and technology is entire capability. So, and when I think about transformation, I think I'm transforming entire capability to some new state. That is it completely getting rid of the capability, starting anew, or saying capability is a core to us, but in the future, it will not be core to us anymore. I think that's what I was trying to make about change with the organization change management. But if I didn't answer your question, I'd be more than happy to have that email come to me, and I'll be more than happy to answer that question.
Question here asking, what are the main barriers in preventing all disciplines from working together?
One of we are human beings. At the end of the day, is that we're not going to let somebody else come in and tell us how to do our job. So what I've seen in my experience is that all these disciplines that we talked about, they are predominantly out within IT. So these disciplines in IT working against each other constantly is because it's essentially a good old turf war. People love their methods, they love their technology, they love their certification, they love their friends who actually said that this works for them. So what we have to do is bring those disciplines in a non-threatening way, creating something that it's not just led by one discipline, it's led by everybody. And with being very crisp as to what we go in after. So by tying it together, there's nobody in charge of it. No one is either being left behind or being put forward. So if you think about a business transformation capability, you can produce those performance measures that I talked about. If I start saying those are performance measures are a result of it because of what enterprise architecture did, all bets are off. So what I have to do is that there has to become an organizational or enterprise capability, not an individual disciplines capability. So the biggest obstacle is being inclusive, to be charged of the whole thing ourselves. So you don't have there's a performance of every individual on the team is measured, but the win and loss happens as a whole team. You provide services. Services are provided on time, on budget. If you don't provide those services, you as a team member fail. So keep the team concept in mind and bring the disciplines. A disruptive change approach that I talked about at Christian's in the article is that actually a very good starting point to read a little bit more about it.
That's great. I have a number of questions asking for a little bit more detail about BT Cloud. especially asking what templates are included in BTCal. For example, business capability templates, roadmap templates. Perhaps you can just illuminate us a little bit more on that, Jason.
There is a lot of, all of that things are included in it, and then those who are interested, I will very highly recommend to you, go to the Open Group certification page that I sent and the link in there. And there's a conformance criteria that addresses 600 some audit requirements, and then it tells you very much in detail how each one of the requirements is met, and if that still doesn't answer your question, and then you can go to the BT Cloud page and see what templates and documents are available. If that answers your question, flip me a note. I'll be more than happy to provide you some input. But a good starting point is the Open Group website with the tools certification, certified tools register.
So I've got a question here from Ravi. He's asking, does business transformation always have to start at gate go?
G0. No, it doesn't. Actually, this is the beauty of this thing, is that when thinking about G0, G0 is the only thing is that when I look at a capability, that capability needs to either be eliminated or new one has to be integrated. So that's looking at the senior management level, but most of the organization, 99% of the capabilities that they have, they are going to continuously operate with them, and they're just improving them. So thinking about capability, they say, my experience is that when an organization looked at 1,000 projects, 65% of the projects were at the gate 3, G3. Because they were marginally improving a capability, because that's all they needed to do. But of having that checkpoint is that it forces you to think, should it be marginally improved or should it be completely changed? And then an opportunity to have a very intelligent conversation up front about each capability before you're marginally improving something what the world has changed on you. Now, it does to start at G0. Every work product that, if you look at it in one of the slides, is every work product comes in that depending on how big the change is, that's the starting gate for that work. Simon?
Sorry, absolutely. I've got a question here from Adrian. He's asking, what kind of business transformations can succeed early on to prove the value of the business transformation capability to sponsors?
It's the two things that you can do is the one is that if you don't have a major business transformation program coming up and coming down at your 100 miles an hour, and you don't know where you are in terms of capabilities, then do that transformation program whether you have the capability or not. But if that is not the case, then I don't want them to think about it internal. If you are within an IT organization, think internally. The organization has a whole bunch of capabilities that we provide to the business. Let's think about those capabilities like document management, like business, the BI, business intelligence data warehouse, and whole series of basic IT hygiene capability. What's your ability to handle service calls? How quickly bring your systems back up? What are your service levels? Are you meeting the service levels? Those basic IT hygiene transformations that we can do immediately without having to go anywhere will have a huge impact on the business and also to your credibility and learn at the same time. So you have to have start big on the business side. Let's rethink of the entire what business we're in. But I can start thinking about it and say, what is my current IT operating budget? How do I know it's at optimum? And then I might start to go into my platform as an architecture.
Okay, I've noticed the time, so I need to think about asking the last few questions. We've got a question here from Abu Sava. He's asking, is it recommended to use the entire range of frameworks like COBIT, TOGAF, ITIL, and PMI, and so on? What's your use of these kind of frameworks, Jason?
The frameworks are great because what they were designed to be comprehensive. So when we create a business transformation capability, we pull only components of frameworks that are relevant to us. Because the organization doesn't care whether you're using a COBIT, or using this and that, or using entirely or not. What they're most interested in is that, am I getting my program delivered on time, on a budget, and meeting the organization needs and getting the outcomes. So this is what you do is that you take a framework like the like a capability-based value delivery and look at that thing and say what has it has done, and then try just only components of the framework that are needed to answer these questions. And I wouldn't recommend that we do every single thing in every framework, because those frameworks were designed to be comprehensive.
So it's past, so I think make this the last question. And this from Abu again. You refer to the BT project. He's saying, what about the risk management phases? Is it covering each of the...
Absolutely, because there's two ways of looking at the risk. Is as the new requirements get identified, is that some of those requirements are actually addressing risk. So now I have a whole bunch of architecture requirements that are affecting helping manage risk. So I have a whole series of risk management requirements that we identify. That aspect of a second aspect of this thing is that when I'm executing architecture at G0 to each one of the phases, then I have a risk element already introduced into it when I'm doing assessment in my quality checklist. Is saying, have you answered these questions? So risk is assessed at every level, regardless of what phase you're at and in the context of that phase.
That's great, and that's fantastic. Well, as I said, it's now way past the hour, so I think this would be a good time to wrap this session up. Do you have any last points you'd like to make, Jason?
Just wanted to thank you and Simon for facilitating this great presentation, great conversation with many people, and tremendously enjoyed it. And it's been my pleasure and my privilege to have the opportunity to speak to this many people. And those people who are on the phone and considering coming to having more discussion on this topic, please join us in Washington, D.C., the Open Group Conference on July 16th to 20th, and this dialogue will continue on, and we don't have, there's not one person who has all the answers. We all know something, and that's enough to start with. And we are, our organization is trying to take on business transformation programs, at least we put a best foot forward and from it. And with that, and I thank you, and if there are still unanswered questions, I'd be more than happy to receive them as an email and send them to me, and I'll be happy to answer them.
So many thanks, and thank you everyone for participating in today's event. And I would encourage you to keep an eye on the Open Group website, where there is a full list of webinars. So once again, thank you, Jason, and thank you everyone for participating. And I'll close the event at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.